He gave her his only blanket in the freezing rain ever, knowing she'd change his life forever. Late one stormy night, a pregnant millionaire sat trembling in her broken-down caravan by everyone she thought loved her. Just a few feet away, a shivering homeless black boy noticed her tears through the cracked window. What happened next would set off a chain of miracles neither of them could ever have imagined. If stories of kindness, hope, and second chances touch your heart, you're in the right place. Here, we believe even the smallest act of love can change a life forever. So if this story moves you, if you've ever felt alone, forgotten, or in need of a miracle, please consider subscribing. Let's grow a family that believes in the power of compassion and healing. New York's winter can be cruel, especially when you're 8 months pregnant, stranded and out of options. Elise Montgomery had once graced the covers of fashion magazines and mingled at charity galas with the city's elite. Her name had carried weight. Her smile had been a trademark of power wrapped in elegance. But on this night, none of it mattered. Her world had come crashing down. Her fiancé, once her business partner, lover, and closest confidant, had disappeared without a trace. But not before clearing out every account they had built together. Elise hadn't just lost money. She had lost trust, safety, and the illusion that someone would be there when she needed them the most. Now, she sat alone in her Bentley on a deserted side street, the engine dead, the battery long drained. She'd been trying to call for help for hours, but her phone had died too. No driver, no assistant, no press, just silence and the sound of icy wind hitting the windows. Her designer coat, which had once been photographed on runways, now barely covered her swollen stomach. She curled her knees inward, gasping quietly through sobs, trying not to panic. Every movement of her unborn child inside her was a brutal reminder that she couldn't afford to fall apart. Not now. Not when someone else's life depended on her pulling through across the street. Near a bus stop littered with trash and forgotten flyers, a boy no older than 13 watched her. He was wrapped in layers of mismatched clothing, none of them thick enough to fight the chill. A plastic tarp hung over his shoulders like a cape, catching snowflakes that melted instantly on his cheeks. His sneakers had holes in the toes. He had no gloves. But what he did have, what he had learned to use as armor, was awareness. He noticed people who were hurting because he too lived in the quiet agony of being ignored. Elise hadn't seen him. At first her head was low, chin tucked into her coat, tears streaking down her makeup-smudged face. But when she looked up for a brief moment, their eyes locked. It was barely a second, but something passed between them, something ancient, human, unspoken. He approached slowly, his steps cautious, like he was afraid she might scream or shoo him away. When he reached the car, he didn't knock. He simply stood there until she rolled down the window. His voice was soft, almost apologetic. "You look cold, ma'am." She blinked, startled by the unexpected kindness in his eyes. "I'm okay," she said quickly, trying to wipe her tears with the sleeve of her coat. But she wasn't okay, and they both knew it. Without another word, he pulled off the only real source of warmth he had, a threadbare faded blanket. It was worn, frayed at the edges, but folded neatly in his small hands. He held it out through the window, shivering as the wind bit at his arms. "You need this more than me," he said. Elise wanted to say no. She wanted to protect his dignity, to give him something instead. But in that moment, all she could do was accept it. Her hands trembled as she took the blanket, and when their fingers touched, she broke. All the pressure, the betrayal, the pirate came pouring out in sobs that echoed inside the cold car. And then, to her surprise, he didn't run away. He stepped closer and let her cry into his shoulder. He was just a child, but in that frozen hour, he became her anchor dot. She didn't even know his name, but that night, he saved her life. His name was Jeremiah. It was nearly midnight when they sat across from each other in the warmth of a rundown diner tucked between a pawn shop and a closed laundromat. The neon lights outside flickered erratically, casting fractured glows through the frost-covered window, but inside the air was thick with the smell of old grease and coffee, comforting in its own way. Elise stirred a cup of hot chocolate with both hands wrapped around it, trying to steady the tremor in her fingers. Across from her, the boy who had just handed over his only blanket sat quietly, his shoulders tense and his eyes darting toward the door every few seconds, as though expecting someone or something to take this moment away from him. She ordered him a hot meal, eggs, toast, sausage, and pancakes, and watched as he waited politely, though his hunger seemed to vibrate from him like heat off asphalt. When the plate arrived, he looked at it in disbelief for a full 3 seconds before picking up his fork. He didn't gorge. He ate with the reverence of someone who'd learned not to take even a single bite for granted. Elise didn't push him to speak. She just watched him with a soft ache in her chest, sipping her drink, her swollen belly pressing against the table. It had been months since anyone had shown her genuine care. Now here she was being cared for by a child who had nothing. After a while he looked up and said, "My name's Jeremiah." She smiled, and it felt like the first real smile she'd managed in weeks. "That's a good name," she whispered. He told her, in broken fragments, that he'd been living on the streets since he was 9. A fire had destroyed the apartment he lived in with his parents. His mother had died instantly. His father passed Days later from the burns he had no siblings. No one came to claim him. Foster care was a revolving door, filled with people who saw him as either a burden or a threat. So he ran, and he stayed gone. When Elise told him she was going to have a baby soon, she expected him to grow quiet or awkward. Instead, he looked her straight in the eye and said, "You'll be a good mom. You helped me tonight." And then he added, with a touch of longing, "I never had a birthday cake." The simplicity of that truth hit her like a punch in the stomach. Not just the words, but the emptiness they revealed. This boy, wise beyond his years, had never blown out candles. Never had anyone sing his name with joy. Never had a moment to feel special. "I'm going to fix that one day," she said, her voice cracking. "I promise." She meant it. Every word before they parted ways. Standing under the buzzing diner sign, Elise took both of his hands in hers. "One day, when I'm back on my feet, I'll come find you. I won't forget this. I won't forget you." Jeremiah smiled, a small, grateful smile that looked like it hurt his face from lack of practice. "People say stuff like that all the time." "I'm not people," she replied. He nodded. She got in her car, jump-started by a tow truck driver. She'd finally reached while they were eating and watched him wave once before disappearing down the block. The next morning, she went back to the diner. She checked the alleys, the shelters, the corners. He was gone, vanished into the city like a ghost. But Elise never forgot. She named her son Jeremiah, not out of sentiment, but out of purpose. Every time she whispered his name, she remembered the boy who gave her hope when she was sinking. And with that memory stitched into her spirit, she began to rebuild. She went to therapy. She sold what she had left and invested what remained into a modest apartment and prenatal care. She gave birth alone, but not afraid. She wrote letters to foundations, lobbied donors, and within 2 years, she launched a non-profit for homeless youth, the Jeremiah Project. Each child she helped reminded her of that one night. Each success felt like she was reaching out to him across time and space, whispering, "I didn't forget." But no matter how much she tried, she couldn't find her Jeremiah. Every face that resembled his gave her pause. Every shelter she visited, every outreach event. She searched, but he was never there. Until 5 years later, she was folding laundry in her living room, with the news murmuring in the background when she heard a name, Jeremiah Brooks. Her heart skipped. Then the screen showed him, taller now, older. But the smile, the eyes, no doubt, he was speaking to a group of teens in a community center, talking about resilience, choices, and how one stranger once showed him kindness that made him believe he mattered. Elise dropped the laundry basket. He was real, he'd survived, he'd become more, and he'd remembered her too. The community center sat on the corner of a once-forgotten neighborhood, now blossoming with renewed life. A mural of children smiling under a painted sun stretched across its outer wall, vibrant with hope. Inside, the buzz of conversation, laughter, and clinking chairs filled the wide room where young boys sat in folding chairs, hanging on every word spoken by the tall young man at the front. Elise stood in the doorway, her hands clutching her purse like a lifeline. The years had been kind and cruel in turns. Lines marked her face that hadn't been there before, and her hair had thinned slightly around the temples, but her eyes, though, still burned with a fire that had only grown stronger with motherhood and mission. It had taken only one segment on the evening news to bring her here, one fleeting image, one voice, one look in his eyes that told her the boy she had met in the dead of winter 5 years ago had become the man standing confidently before her now. Jeremiah. He was telling the boys about making choices in the face of pain, about how life wouldn't always be fair. But that dignity wasn't something the world could give or take. It had to be claimed. "I was just a kid when someone looked at me and saw more than a street kid," he said, unaware of the woman watching from the back. "She didn't ask for anything. She gave me a meal, a moment, a promise." Elise took a step forward, her breath catching, and I believed her. Jeremiah continued. "Even when the city swallowed me up again, I held on to that one truth, that I mattered to someone, somewhere." His gaze swept the room and stopped. His mouth parted slightly, and he blinked like he couldn't trust his eyes. Time froze. We stared at her with disbelief and wonder slowly building in his expression. The noise in the room faded into silence as his lips moved without sound for a moment. Then he finally said it, a whisper that cracked through the quiet. "You came back." Elise's eyes flooded with tears. She nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. Jeremiah moved before anyone else could process what was happening, walking straight toward her, then running the last few steps like a child rushing to meet someone lost and found all over again. They embraced tightly, no words, just the deep, breathless relief of two souls long separated by life's cruel timing but reunited by something stronger: fate, promise, love. That evening, after the boys had been dismissed and the staff cleared out, Elise took a small box from her purse and placed it in Jeremiah's hands. "It's yours," she said softly. Inside was a key, not just to a home, but to a new beginning. "I wanted to give you something that no one could ever take from you," she whispered. "Security, a future, a place that's yours." Tears welled up in his eyes, but he fought them back, his lips pressed tight in humility. "There's more," she smiled. "I'd like you to come to dinner, meet someone." Jeremiah arrived later that evening at her modest but warm apartment. The hallway smelled of fresh bread and cinnamon. As the door opened, a little boy ran out and nearly tackled him with excitement. "Jeremiah!" the child shouted. Jeremiah knelt, stunned, as the boy wrapped his arms around his neck. "This is Jeremiah Jr.," Elise said behind them, her voice trembling. He looked up at her with astonishment. "You named him after me. I told you I wouldn't forget." The man who had once given away his only blanket in the snow now held a child named in his honor, standing in the warmth of a home he could finally call his own. He wasn't just the boy in the shadows anymore. He was a mentor, a builder, a life changer, a hero, and Elise. She wasn't the broken woman stranded in a frozen car anymore. She had become a beacon, a mother, a founder of hope, but most importantly, she had kept her promise. They sat down for dinner, Jeremiah, Elise, and little Jeremiah Jr. laughing between bites. Stories flowing like old times, like family. There was a quiet understanding between them, a shared strength shaped by suffering but carved into beauty by compassion. They had been strangers once, lost in different ways. But on one night, under falling snow, a boy with nothing gave a woman everything she needed to keep going. And now, years later, she had returned it all tenfold, because sometimes the most broken hearts give the purest love, and one selfless act can change the course of two lives forever.